Hello and welcome to another video review, and today's finally the day. We finally made it. It's Batman Day. I feel like I've been talking about this movie forever. I've been, looking at videos and screenshots and trailers of this movie. It seems like 5 years. And that's because it kind of actually is. You have to remember, you go back and look, like this movie started as the Ben Affleck solo Batman project. And then he finally realized he couldn't handle everything, so they brought in director Matt Reeves, and then he was going to direct Ben Affleck, and then Ben Affleck obviously famously wanted to step away from the role. He'll have his, ending and due in The Flash out at the end of this year, but that kind of left the door open for Matt Reeves to make his own Batman movie. And we're now seeing the finished product, a movie that... This review will be mostly spoiler-free. I will have a very brief spoiler section just because I can't avoid it. But I will let you know very clearly my verdict and when it's the spoiler section. So, the other thing I want to say about this is Batman's almost like James Bond in a way of like, we get a new one every couple of years. This franchise has been rebooted so many times and is always going to continue to be rebooted. And I feel like when a new Batman is picked, it's always a controversial decision, I mean, you go back to the 89 Batman, Michael Keaton was an extremely controversial decision. Obviously, I know him as Batman. Like, he is the Batman I grew up with, along with Kevin Conroy, animated Batman, but he's always going to be Batman to me. You have, the controversial decision of Clooney, which didn't work out. Kilmer, which, he was okay. You have Bale, who started out really good, and by the end was almost a caricature of himself in The Dark Knight Rises, but... and then Ben Affleck, who, when they announced him, I was pissed because I didn't like Ben Affleck, and he really turned it around. I actually ended up thinking he was one of the best on-screen Batmans when it was all said and done. But Pattinson, when they announced it, because of how I felt about Ben Affleck, and then went in, I said, I'm going to keep an open mind. A lot of people are like, oh, it's the Twilight boy, he's not going to be able to do it. And my thought process behind it the whole time was, well, have you ever seen Good Time? Have you ever seen The Lighthouse? Like, this dude can actually act. He's not just Edward Cullen from Twilight. He, has moved on from that. And so the two biggest questions going into this movie was, A, can they reboot the franchise successfully after, so many times it's been rebooted? And B, is Robert Pattinson a good Batman? And so what do I think is a 30-plus year lifelong Batman fan? I've been a fan of Batman since 3 years old, seeing the original Batman in theaters. First movie I ever saw in a movie theater. Actually, that's not true. The first movie I saw in a movie theater was The Little Mermaid, but that was the second movie I saw, only because I begged and begged and begged. And so what do I think about this interpretation? What is my thoughts of The Batman? I loved this movie. I loved every minute of it. I have a few minor gripes with it, and we'll get to those, but from beginning to long, drawn out end, because it is a 3-hour movie, I loved every minute of it. And I think Robert Pattinson killed it as Batman. I think he's a fantastic, phenomenal Batman. This is a, actor-defining role for some people. And I think this really will take him to the next level as an actor. He's a fantastic Batman. And I think the other thing I want to talk about with this review and about this movie is this is a fantastic take on Batman, because this is almost the truest take on the character. Like, we've seen it time and time again in the movies. These are usually action-oriented. Batman's crashing through windows, beating criminals to a pulp, and going after one of the crazy villains, because as a Batman fan, I'm not gonna escape saying this, he has the best villains group of any superhero, and always will. So, Spider-Man, a close second. And so you always go to these movies, you want to see this new take on this villain, but also the new take on Batman. And we got like a realistic take with the Nolan movies. What's interesting and different about this take, and you'll know it from the almost jaw-dropping opening scene, which is unlike any other Batman movie you'll ever see. It is sets the tone for this movie, and I don't want to spoil it, but let's just say this movie is very much a police procedural detective cop story rather than like this crazy superhero movie. It takes its time. It allows the actors to breathe and to act. It's not just action sequence after action sequence. And that's one of the aspects I loved about this movie. Because they took the time to do that, they allowed this on-screen interpretation of Batman to actually be a detective. He's palling around with Jim Gordon almost 90% of this movie. It's him and Jim Gordon solving this serial killer murder mystery, this case, and it's fantastic. And the other thing I liked about this movie is that they let Pattinson do his own narration. So there's a couple of scenes where he kind of narrates like his journal entries. It's fantastic. It's almost like a comic book came to life. And also, the other thing I want to say before I get into the actors is this movie, unlike the Nolan trilogy, and the thing is most people are going to compare this to the Nolan trilogy because that's what came before it, but this Gotham City is amazing. This actually feels like this dirty, grimy, just repugnant Gotham City that you've read about, that you've seen in comic books and stuff. This isn't like the Nolan trilogy where it's just Chicago, but it's Gotham City. Like, this is actually Gotham frickin' City, and it's awesome. There's, the Gothic structures and stuff because they filmed some scenes in London, and it looks amazing. So, really, really love that aspect of this movie. But let's talk about the actors. Let's talk about their performances and who stands out. The thing I'll say is nobody gives a bad performance in this movie, first off the bat. Like, there's nobody I was like, wow, that guy really phoned it in. There's none of that. So you have Pattinson's take on Batman, which this is the first Batman movie where he's basically Batman the entire movie. There's a few scenes with Bruce Wayne, and that's where I have one of my complaints with the movie is, as Bruce Wayne, he's kind of awkward and still very much figuring out not only how to be Batman, but also to be Bruce Wayne. And while I get where they're going with it with the character, his Bruce Wayne didn't really work for me as much as his Batman did. Now, this is something that can be fixed in a sequel, and they're going to make a sequel to this movie. Let's not kid ourselves. But that was my only gripe with Pattinson's performance because his Batman voice is so damn good. Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, I think, is the best interpretation on screen that we've seen of the character since Michelle Pfeiffer. I might actually like her more than Michelle Pfeiffer. I didn't really care for Anne Hathaway in The Dark Knight Rises. I thought she was kind of whatever, but they also didn't give her much to work with. In this movie, they give Kravitz a ton to work with, and she also has this immediate on-screen chemistry with Pattinson's Batman that it just works. Like, you really feel like they actually have feelings for each other and emotions and interactions. It's really awesome to see. Paul Dano as the Riddler. So this is not a whimsical Riddler like Jim Carrey or Frank Gorshin, who played the Riddler in the 66 Batman. This isn't that. So if you're going to this movie going, oh, there's none of that. I'll also say, and I should probably have said this at the beginning of the review, this is not a kid-friendly Batman. Like, from the opening scene, it is straight up, this is not a kid-friendly Batman movie. I'd almost argue that this movie pushes a PG-13 to its limits. It probably should have been rated R. It is gruesome at times, some of the killing and stuff, but just the themes that it deals with, it's not a kid-friendly movie, and we'll get to more of that aspect, but Paul Dano, he plays the Riddler as a Zodiac killer because that's what they're going for here. He's creepy, he's terrifying, he's menacing, he's very awkward. It's a phenomenal performance. I mean, this is a dude that had to act in this weird, like, military suit that military raincoat suit that covers his face, it covers his whole body, and the only thing that you see of him for like 95% of the movie are his glasses that he wears over them, and like they're getting fogged up all the time. But what a performance. And going into the movie, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this take of the Riddler, but it works, and it works extremely well. So really, really liked his performance. There's a scene between him and Batman towards the end of the movie. Again, not really a spoiler, but they also have a really good on-screen chemistry, and it makes that scene really fantastic. Other huge, phenomenal performance in this movie is Jeffrey Wright as Jim Gordon. I always love the character of Jim Gordon. I think he's a fantastic character, and this is a Gordon you see the most of in any on-screen Batman. And he's fantastic. Like, I had no complaints with his performance. Does he top Gary Oldman for me? Probably not. That's always going to be my favorite interpretation of the character. But he is a very high bar, close second. And I look forward to seeing more of him when they do sequels and stuff. Final performance I want to kind of throw out here. There's a couple more. There's Colin Farrell's the Penguin. Honestly, an Oscar churning, like, it has to be an Oscar nod churning performance, because you don't even know it's him between the makeup and stuff. And at first, when they were showing pictures, I'm like, oh, he's really gonna ham it up. Now, this is a dude who, he might only be in this movie like 20 minutes, but he's having the time of his freaking life, and it's awesome. A phenomenal performance. And then finally, we have Andy Serkis as Alfred. This was my other gripe with the movie, is he's in it but very little. He probably has about as much screen time as the Penguin, maybe a little bit more. His couple scenes with Bruce are fantastic, but I needed more. And I do want to see more of him in a sequel. Obviously, he'll be in a sequel when they do it, but there's just not a lot of Alfred in this movie, and they could have done more with him, but he was not a bad Alfred. It's just they didn't do a lot with him, so I'm a little reserved on, like, an opinion just because of how little he's in the movie. And then finally, John Turturro as Carmine Falcone, also fantastic. So that kind of covers the big, acting performances in the movie. The story of it, I loved every aspect of it. I loved the detective cop story. The action sequences, well, there are not as many as, like, your typical Batman movie. The ones that are in this are incredible. I have to shout out the new Batmobile, which I love. It's my favorite Batmobile I've seen on screen since the '89 Batman, which is always going to be Batmobile for me, but I didn't care for the Tumbler. The Ben Affleck Batmobile was fine, and some of those ones from the other, like, later 90s Batman movies were not really my thing. This one is a powerhouse. Like, it's like this DIY car he built, but it just has this, like, oomph. When he turns that thing on, it is screeching. It is like it goes. There is only one real major sequence with the Batmobile in the movie, and that sequence is one of the best scenes of the entire movie. Like, and if you look up any of the production on this movie, like, there's very little CG in the movie. They blew up that tanker and, like, drove that car through it, and it shows. It's an incredible sequence. You've seen the sequence in the trailers. Again, not really a spoiler, but seeing it on screen is even more awesome. And that Batmobile is something else. Like, let me tell you. So, the gadgets and stuff. One of the other really cool things about the movie, this is very much a Batman who is very early in his career. This is only year 2 of his career, so he's still kind of figuring out how to be Batman. And that's a big part of the movie. And by the end of the movie, he's kind of figured that out, which is cool, and we'll talk about that more in the spoiler section. But one of the things I really liked about this movie is there's a sequence where he uses some new gadgetry to escape a situation, and it goes horribly wrong. Like, you're like watching it, he just wipes out. And I liked seeing that in this movie because, again, it shows a more human element and something we don't really see in these movies. Most of the times you see Batman, everything is, at 110%. He knows everything. He's not there yet. It really, man, like, I just thinking back on it, I don't have, like, a lot of negative things to say about it. The score, they use Nirvana's "Something in the Way" song a couple times in the movie. It really fits and sets a tone. Obviously, big Nirvana, I'm a 90s kid, big Nirvana fan, always have been. And I liked that addition into the movie, but I liked, my fear through the trailers, like, oh, they're going to fill this up with a lot of pop culture and songs and stuff. They don't. That's kind of the only song. There's one other one, but it's not what I would consider a extremely pop culture song. And then this score, the musical score of this movie, also amazing. It has a theatricality to it, but it's not Danny Elfman either. It's its own thing, and that's awesome. We're not trying to mimic something else. They're doing something different with it. The cinematography is amazing in this movie. This is one of the best looking Batman movies you'll ever see. One of the best looking movies you'll ever see. Like, it's amazing. Some of the shots in this movie are unlike anything you've ever seen in a Batman movie before. So I have to hammer it home. Like, there's very little I disliked about this movie. I kind of, said what they are here, but again, I don't believe anything is perfect, but I'm giving this movie an A+. I had a blast with it. I loved it from beginning to end. I cannot wait to see it again. I'm probably not going to go see it again in the theater. It does come out on HBO Max April 19th, so I'd probably be watching it a couple more times. I definitely want to watch it on my OLED because I think it's going to look even better. And you guys don't know behind the scenes, I do wear glasses to watch TV, and I totally forgot to bring them to the theater. So there were parts of that movie that were a little bit blurry for me, but Overall, loved it. A+. Like, I really have nothing major negative to say about it. So, with that being said, that's my score for the movie. I want to briefly talk about spoilers here. So, if you just wanted to see my review and you haven't seen the movie yet, you can turn the video off now, come back to it after you've seen the movie. This is your warning. Everything from here on is going to be spoiler territory for this movie. One of my big gripes with the movie, and thankfully it was going to be my biggest gripe, and they relented and turned back on it, was I thought for sure they were going to turn Riddler into the character Hush, and they were kind of playing off this in a couple parts of the movie very heavily, and I was like, oh man, don't do it, because that's gonna kill a great movie. And they don't. I'm happy to say that they don't. But there's a very interesting scene, the scene between him and Batman in Arkham Asylum, where they're having their conversation, and he keeps taunting him with, you know, Bruce Wayne, Bruce Wayne, Bruce Wayne, and you can tell, like, it's the kind of thing where, like, it can be interpreted as the Riddler actually knows that he's Bruce Wayne, or he doesn't. And I think what makes the scene such a masterstroke of writing is the whole time you're watching it, you think, oh, he freaking knows that he's Batman. And then finally it's revealed that it doesn't seem like he actually knows. And that's when Batman actually starts talking to him. It's a phenomenal scene. I really, really like that part of the movie. The other thing I mentioned before, none of these villains die. There's one villain death in the movie. It's justified. I'm not put down by it. I'm not going to say who it is, but none of the other villains die. You know, and I love that about this movie, because you watch all these other superhero movies, and one of the biggest cardinal sins of any superhero movie is killing off a good villain. You know, look at even 89 Batman. You killed Jack Nicholson, Joker. Look at 2005 Batman Begins. You killed Ra's al Ghul. Like, these are stupid decisions, and they don't do that here. They also, you know, again, they really pay attention to detail and his identity. Nobody knows who he is at the end of this movie, except for Alfred, and that's how it should be. There's a couple parts in the movie where they could have taken his mask off, and people could have known, but they didn't do it. The other big thing I want to talk about, and this is probably the heaviest spoiler for the movie, which is why I kept it for this section, is there's a scene at the end of the movie where the Riddler is in Arkham Asylum, and there's his buddy in the cell next to him, which it's revealed after a couple of clever lines of dialogue that it is the Joker, or who is going to become the Joker, because I think it's been said, like, this is a pre-version of the character, but they briefly show him. He definitely has tinted green hair and a goofy smile. At first, going into the movie, I kind of already knew. It was heavily rumored that they were going to do a little cameo like this in the movie. They've already picked out the actor. I forget his name. And walking into the movie, I was like, man, I really don't want them to do Joker for the next movie. After seeing this movie, I'm perfectly okay with it. I think there's enough good faith with what director Matt Reeves did with this movie that totally works, and it's fine. I also like how this movie ended, and that's one of the big things. So at the end of it, they do have their big apocalyptic like ending where basically the Riddler blows all these seawalls into Gotham, and all this water comes flushing through, and it turns the city into either a no man's land or 0 year storyline, which if you've never read the 0 year storyline, it's from one of my favorite all-time comic authors, Scott Snyder. It's a fantastic story. I highly recommend you read it. If they're going to go with that storyline, it's going to be a hell of a sequel for this movie. For this franchise, I should say. And I loved the end of it. The other thing I'll say is, like, there's a brief scene at the end where he's kind of taking out Riddler's thugs, and then they rip off the mask of one of the thugs, and they ask, well, who are you? And he says, I'm Vengeance. And that kind of makes it click in Batman, and you have this great, almost sweet ending where he is helping the National Guard, like, lift people out of Gotham that have been injured. And he's having this monologue and realizing, like, I need to be more than vengeance. And now he realizes he needs to be a hero. It's a fantastic ending to an already incredible movie. Is it 3 hours long? Yes, it's 3 hours long. But I wouldn't change a thing about it, honestly. So there you guys have it. That is my review of the Batman. I mean, hell, I'm wearing a Batman shirt. I got my statue. At some point, I'm going to get these shelves up. I'm going to go out and buy this new Batmobile. I'm going to try and find a cool toy from it because I loved it so much. I adored this movie. I can't wait for it to hit HBO. I can't wait for it to hit 4K Blu-ray. And I need to see it again. So, as a Bat fan of over 30 years, I'm happy. I'm very, very happy with this movie. So, Hope you guys enjoyed this video review. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And as always, until next time.